It's a very elementary presentation as far as some of the basics of what we might have learned in junior high school or high school. I profess to be no expert on politics. I have not studied political science, but I thought this would be a nice topic to tackle. I came up with the idea just while at breakfast a couple years ago. Who knows how we get these ideas? Maybe talking with my friends. I want to emphasize that we're not going to talk about any political issues. We're not going to voice any opinions on candidates or current members of Congress. That's very important to remember. And so on that note, I am going to go ahead and get started here. You can see pictured here the members of the Senate in the upper left, and the House in the bottom right, and the Capitol complex in the middle. I want to start with this statement. The inner workings of the United States Congress are difficult to explain and difficult for citizens to grasp, which contributes to the gulf that historically has separated Congress from the people who choose its members. I find that very interesting and a lot of truth in that. That was from a Robert Kaiser, from a book of his that I consulted. Before we get into the actual Congress, we have to understand a little bit about what happened before Congress, before we became the United States, when we were colonists. Britain's punitive measures against the colonies started before 1774, but in 1774, they put out what they called the Intolerable Acts, or the Coercive Acts. The Parliament of Britain passed these acts to punish the Massachusetts colonists for the events of the Boston Tea Party. They stopped the Massachusetts legislature and town meetings. The British Navy blockaded the Boston Harbor to prevent any shipping trade from entering or leaving. And the colonists were ordered to quarter British soldiers. And these acts all united the colonists against the British, as you can imagine. So the colonists responded by creating the first Continental Congress in October of 1774. They boycotted British trade. They petitioned the king to repeal the Intolerable Acts, but the British did not repeal them. Following the battles of Lexington and Concord on April 19th of 1775, and again without any repeal of the acts from the king, we convened the Second Continental Congress. On May 10th, 1775, the Lee Resolution, proposed on June 7th of 1776 and passed on July 2nd, formal assertion of free and independent states. The Declaration of Independence was a formal document. We had a de facto national government at the outset of the war. We organized the Continental Army and appointed George Washington as commander-in-chief. The provisional government was in place until March 1st of 1781, when disbanded, and it approved the Articles of Confederation in 1775. The war was from 1775 to 1783, 8-year span, American Revolutionary War. The Articles of Confederation was the first Constitution of the United States. It became legal in 1781 after ratification by all 13 states. It preserved the independence and sovereignty of the states. It provided for only a weak central government with powers only to declare war and peace and maintain an army and coin money. Each state had one vote in Congress, regardless of size or population. But an interest in a stronger national government led to the Constitutional Convention. The government under the Articles was replaced by the federal government under the Constitution, March 4th, 1789. So our United States Congress is a bicameral legislature of the federal government, 2 houses, upper house and lower house. The Constitutional Convention went on for quite some time, from late May until rather late September in 1787 in Philadelphia, with the signing of the United States Constitution on September 17th of 1787. There was argumentation, should we have a unicameral legislature or a bicameral legislature? Of course, the bicameral won out. And the Great Compromise, as it was called, of 1787, provided for proportional representation in the lower house, but the upper house, the Senate, to be weighed equally between the states. There was argumentation over these things. It wasn't cut and dried. So the first Congress convened on March 4th of 1789 and went to March 4th of 1781 for 2 years. The first Congress, Federal Hall, New York City, had the first and second sessions of the first Congress. The third session was held at the Congress Hall in Philadelphia. The sixth Congress was on November of 1800 in Washington, D.C. That's when it moved to Washington, D.C. The emergence of the Federalist and Democratic Republican parties in the early 1790s. George Washington argued against the formation of parties. He warned against the formation of parties. He believed that the country should and could function without the existence of political parties. But of course, they came about. So, we had the first Congress in 1789, and we're now toward the end of the 116th Congress, which convened on January 3rd of 2019 and runs until January 3rd of 2021. Every 2 years. And every 2 years we have a new Congress. We have new representatives every 2 years. The upper house, as it's called, or body, or upper body, upper chamber, is the Senate. It has 100 members. If this data is current, and it's pretty current, we have 53 Republicans and 45 Democrats and 2 independents. And here it is. Every senator has his or her own desk. To become a United States Senator, you must be 30 years of age. I understand Joseph Biden, our president-elect, became, well, he didn't become, but he was elected a senator at age 29. But his birthday is November 20th, and when he took office, he was 30 years old, perhaps the youngest to take office. I'm not sure, but amongst the youngest. You have to have been a citizen of the United States for 9 years. It's a 6-year term, which is very desirable because not having to campaign every 2 years. And it's considered to be perhaps a little more of an elite position. You have to be a citizen of the state that you're representing. There are no term limits. There are 2 senators per state. They were originally elected by the state legislatures. But in 1913, the 17th Amendment provided for the direct election of senators by the people. The lower house, or lower body or chamber, is the House of Representatives. It has 435 members. It's controlled by the Democrats at this time, 233 Democrats, 197 Republican, 1 independent, 4 vacant, and 6 non-voting. The vacancies may have changed. What do we mean by 6 non-voting? 1 from Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, American Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, and U.S. Virgin Islands. Non-voting, but members. So here it is, the House of Representatives chamber. No room for desks, very tight quarters. Another view of the House. To become a representative, you must be 25 years old, a citizen of the U.S. for 7 years. It's a 2-year term. You must be a citizen of the state that you represent. There are no term limits. The original number of representatives was 65. And then in 1911, the size was limited to 435. The 435 are reapportioned among the states every 10 years after the census is taken. So we're about to have a reapportioning very soon. There were 33,000 people represented by each representative originally. Today, each representative represents about 711,000 people. Now the non-voting members of the House that I mentioned, they cannot vote, but they can sit on congressional committees and they can introduce legislation. They represent Puerto Rico, which is officially the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, an unincorporated territory of the U.S., American Samoa, Guam, which are also unincorporated territories of the United States, the Northern Mariana Islands, which is considered an insular area and Commonwealth of the United States, the U.S. Virgin Islands is an insular area of the United States, and Washington, D.C., formerly the District of Columbia, the capital. An insular area is a territory of the U.S. of America that is neither a part of one of the 50 U.S. states nor the U.S. Federal District of Washington, D.C. The term insular is from a Latin word meaning island. The District of Columbia has no representation in the Senate. It receives 3 electoral votes in presidential elections as permitted by the 23rd Amendment of 1961. Vacancies in Congress. In the House, they must be filled according to federal law by elections. In the Senate, Constitution gives the states the ability to choose how to fill vacancies. It's done in one of 2 ways. At the next regularly scheduled election, 36 states do that, including Iowa, or by means of a special election, 14 states. In some states, the governor can make an interim appointment before the election takes place, and some other rules apply. What are the demographics of Congress? This is pretty recent data, I think, for the current legislature, but I'm not positive I think so. Racial and ethnical diversity in the 116th Congress. The most racially and ethnically diverse in history. 12% of the House members are African American. The average age of representatives is quite mature, 57.6. The average age of senator is even more, 62.9. The age range of senators in the 116th Congress is 40 for Josh Hawley to 87 for Chuck Grassley and Dianne Feinstein. The age range of representatives in the 116th Congress is from 30 for AOC to 87 for Don Young. The women in the Congress, the Senate is comprised of 25% women, and the House, very similarly, 23% women. Legislators with law degrees, this is from the 114th Congress. 37% of representatives and just over half of senators are attorneys. The powers of Congress are specified in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. First, the enumerated powers, 17 of them. Congress taxes, coins money, regulates commerce, provides for the national defense, establishes post offices and post roads to raise and support an army and navy and declare war and so forth. There's what we call the necessary and proper clause, the elastic clause, that grants Congress the power to pass all laws necessary and proper to carry out the list of 17 enumerated powers. Certain powers are reserved for the Senate. The ratification of treaties, confirmation of cabinet secretaries, Supreme Court justices, federal judges, and other federal executive officials, flag officers, regulatory officials, ambassadors, and other federal uniformed officers. And also the conductance of trials of those impeached by the House. What powers are reserved for the House? The House is where all bills, all revenue bills, appropriation bills must be initiated from the House. The House must be the body that impeaches federal officers. A million here, a million there, pretty soon you're talking real money. That was supposedly ascribed by Everett Dirksen, but there's no evidence that he ever said it, but it's popularly attributed to him. Now, what about the establishment of congressional districts?
If you guys all can hear, I can hear you too.
I hear somebody. What was that?
I just muted them.
We have approximately 711 United States citizens represented in each district. The allocation of House congressional districts after the 210 census. This is how many representatives there are in each state, as you can see, and we see Iowa with 4. We've lost representatives. Congressional redistricting in the United States is done every 10 years after the census. Lines are redrawn. In most states, it's done primarily by state legislatures. The federal government mandates nearly equal population, no race or ethnic discrimination. States have applied varied criteria. When I moved to Iowa in 1979, we had 6 representatives. We have eroded down to 5 in 2003 to 13, and we currently have 4 since 2013. You notice it was 3 years after the census. But after the census is done, redistricting is done. And what you're thinking is of gerrymandering and some poor redistricting, and it's certainly been done in the past in many areas of the United States. The number of Iowa representatives in 1911, believe it or not, was 11. We had 11 representatives. We went down to 9, 8, down to 4 today. Why? Why? Well, look at the box on the left. 1910 U.S. Census, Iowa had 10. We had, let's see, we had 2.41% of the population. Today, we only have just under 1% of the population, and therefore our numbers of representatives are proportional. Congressional Redistricting in Iowa. A legislative services agency, a nonpartisan civil servant group assisted by an independent commission, forms an advisory commission. They draft congressional and state legislative district lines. It's presented as a single bill to the state legislature, which has the power to change but has always agreed. We like to think it's rather non-discriminatory. Gerrymandering, the term comes from Elbridge Gerry, who was the governor of Massachusetts and also vice president under Madison. Gerrymandering is a portmanteau, Gerry plus salamander. Let's go back. Elbridge Gerry configured a district in this fashion that looked almost, they made it look like a salamander, purposely to get the votes, to get the people that he wanted in a certain area. Look at what Illinois' 4th congressional district, the earmuffs district, looks like. It groups Chicago Hispanics together with connecting by Interstate 294, a very strange district. North Carolina's 12th congressional district, look at the shape of that in the bottom. So yes, we have had and probably still have some gerrymandering. Okay, what about the salary and expense allowances for Congress? The salaries of senators and representatives. $174,000 per annum for most. $193,400 for the president pro tem and majority and minority leaders. The Speaker of the House gets $223,500 per annum. Now remember, when we like to complain about their increased salaries, the levels have remained unchanged since 2009. Representatives get a member's representational allowance, an MRA. Each one gets that. It supports personnel, office expenses, travel to the district, and mailings. It averages about $1,270,000 per rep. It allows for $944,000 for hiring staff. And there's a maximum of 18 permanent staff for each representative, and up to 4 additional part-time shared interns and temps and so forth. Senators get what's called a senator's official personnel and office expense account. It averages about $3,300,000 per senator. It's more flexible in allocation than for the reps. There's no limit on staff members. They might average 34. A senator's Washington office staff, the senator can pay the aides as she or he sees fit. The chief of staff, legislative director, communications director, and so forth. The entire group of 100 senators collectively has about 6,000 staffers. They tend to average a very young age, recent college, law school grads. Davy Crockett, who served 3 terms in the House from Tennessee, said when his constituents failed to reelect him, "I am going to Texas and you can go to hell." Let's talk about the Capitol complex, that group of buildings that center around the Hill. Originally, the building was completed in 1800. It consists of the Capitol building, the 4 House buildings, it has their offices, 4 Senate buildings, 2 United States court buildings, 3 Library of Congress buildings, 4 parks, a botanic garden, a power plant, a visitor center, and the Capitol grounds. That's all what we call the Capitol complex. Here's a map showing it pictorially. I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but it's a large complex. The United States Capitol Visitor Center was completed in fairly recent years. It's this whole big business down here near the bottom. It opened in 2008 below the east front of the Capitol. It's 580,000 square feet, quite large. We have an architect of the Capitol who's responsible for the grounds and the buildings. He or she has about 2,100 employees in the group with an annual budget over $600 million. It's a massive budget. A veteran House member to newcomers said, "Look up at the dome. If you reach a point where no goosebumps occur on you, you better draft your resignation letter the next day." The House office buildings include the Cannon, the Longworth, and the Rayburn buildings. The Senate office buildings include the Russell, the Dirksen, and the Hart building. Senate leadership and conductance of business. The Senate party leaders in the 116th Congress. We have what's called the Senate Republican Conference of 53 with a majority leader and an assistant majority leader, or whip. The Senate Democratic Caucus includes the minority leader and the assistant minority leader, or whip. The Vice President of the United States presides over the Senate. That's stipulated in the Constitution. Votes only to break ties. Often yields to the President pro tem, but usually rotates among junior U.S. senators of the majority party to hold the leadership of the meetings. The President pro tempore of the United States Senate is Latin for the time being. Normally the most senior senator of the majority party currently is Chuck Grassley, senator of almost 39, maybe it's 40 or 41 by now. Second highest ranking official of the Senate, chosen by the Senate to act in Vice President's absence. Third in line of succession to the presidency. Various responsibilities of appointments and supervision. Now, the Democratic Caucus of the Senate is a formal organization of Democratic senators. It's used primarily to communicate the party's message to the members. It deals with committee assignments. That's a big issue. The Republican Conference of the Senate is a formal organization of Republican senators. Means of informing the media, provides graphics, radio, TV, internet communication to senators. Historically, it meets at the beginning of each session of Congress to elect leadership and approve committee assignments. It holds weekly policy luncheons to give a forum for discussion. The Senate majority and minority. The majority, through its leader, controls the Senate floor agenda. That's a big deal. Decides which bills come up for votes and when. That's a very big deal. And names committee chairmen who decide when to hold hearings and what legislation to send to the floor for debate. Controls most of the money. The minority is not without its own tools. The ultimate weapon is the filibuster. The Senate majority leader is the true leader of the Senate wielding the most power. He's elected or she by the senators of the majority party, sets the calendar, adjudicates disputes among the membership, leads his or her party and Senate as a whole. Patrick Leahy, the longest serving Democratic senator, says there's a difference between just being quiet and actually listening. The whip. What is a whip? It's from a fox hunting term, whipper-in, for the team member who is responsible for keeping the dogs from straying during a chase. The whip is an elected position. The whip knows how each party member will vote, counts heads, rounds up party members for votes and quorum calls, attempts to change how members will vote where indicated. Conductance of Senate business can only be done if a majority of its members, a quorum, is in the chamber. The quorum is always assumed to be present unless the senator objects. The Senate routinely operates with fewer than 51 members present. Except during votes, only a few members are normally present. Dianne Feinstein, the oldest current senator, said 90% of leadership is the ability to communicate something people want. We have a parliamentarian of the Senate and two senior assistant parliamentarians and one assistant parliamentarian, the official advisor on interpretation of standing rules and parliamentary procedure. That's an important position. We have a secretary of the Senate. I believe it's still Julie Adams, who's from Iowa City. The responsibilities of the secretary include legislative, financial, and administrative functions. We have a sergeant at arms of the Senate. Some duties include holding the gavel used at every session. The sergeant at arms can compel attendance of an absent senator. One order can arrest detained violators of Senate rules. We have chaplains of the Senate and the House. They open each session with prayer, provide pastoral care for senators, staff, and families, hold weekly Senate prayer breakfasts, conduct funerals and some White House events. Now we have Senate pages. We no longer have House pages, but we have Senate pages, usually a 16 or 17-year-old high school junior. The Senate page obtains copies of documents and reports for senators, runs errands between the Capitol and Senate office buildings. The pages lend a hand at weekly conference luncheons. The Senate pages reside in the Daniel Webster Senate Page residence. Here's a photo of the 2010 Senate pages. The House page program ended in 2011. It was deemed too costly. It was a budget of about $5 million, or $69,080 per page to support that page. What about the House leadership and conductance of business? We have a House Democratic Congress and a House Republican Congress. So we have minority and majority leaders and whips. The Speaker of the House is established by the U.S. Constitution. The Speaker does not have to be a member of the House, amazingly. The House Speaker is the highest paid member of the House and Senate of anybody in either chamber. The Speaker of the House is the presiding officer of the House, but usually the position is delegated to others. The Speaker normally does not participate in debates, rarely votes, but sets the legislative calendar, has the power to assign bills to different committees, a powerful position, may use his or her power to determine when bills reach the floor, and ensures passage of legislation supported by the majority party. The Speaker is second in presidential line of succession. The Republican Conference of the House is the party caucus for Republicans of the House, the main forum to convey the party's message to members, produces a daily publication, the Legislative Digest. The chairman directs daily operations. The Democratic Caucus of the House nominates and elects Democratic leadership, composed of all Democrats in the House, writes and enforces rules of conduct and discipline, approves committee assignments. The primary forum for development of party policy and legislative priorities. Weekly meetings are held to communicate the party message. The clerk of the U.S. House of Representatives. We also have reading clerks, bill clerks, journal, tally, and enrolling clerks. There's quite a bit of administrative need to conduct the work of the House and Senate. Similarly, we have a parliamentarian of the House who advises the presiding officers, members, and staff on procedures and precedents, prepares, compiles, and publishes precedents of the House. If it is still Thomas Wickham Jr., he grew up in Epworth, Iowa. The Sergeant at Arms of the House carries the mace of the House in front of Speaker in procession to the rostrum, leads formal processions, presidential inaugurations, joint sessions of Congress, etc. May be ordered to round up absent representatives and performs administrative services. Sam Rayburn's Speaker of the House for some 17 years, in advising new House members, said, "If you want to get along, go along." I'm not sure if we have time yet today because there's quite a bit on committees and subcommittees. Let's see where we are in the process here. We're on slide 178. And I think we're probably going to have to stop at that point. That would be a good place to stop. It's a lot of material, kind of rapid fire. But let's go ahead and stop at this point.